So, good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning. If we stopped right now and left, we'd already be blessed. Wasn't all of those parts that came already, weren't they such a blessing for us? They were for me. I trust they were for you as well. If you don't know me, my name is Rob Irwin. I'm not the pastor. I'm one of the many leaders here. And I want to talk about the topic on the screen, honoring our father and mother. But there's some stuff we need to do before we get to that. We'll get to that in just a minute. So there are people in our congregation who have certain life events that come along, and we should recognize them rather than just say, oh yeah, we should do something about it. And I just want to mention one of those people, or it's actually a couple. It's our dear Jean and Vera McLeod. Can y'all see where Jean and Vera are? Maybe Vera's there. There's Jean. Can you two stand up for just a minute? Is that possible? Thank you. So there's actually a card that Warren has for you two. And this is a card that many of us have had the opportunity to sign. And the card says happy anniversary because about a week ago, they celebrated what to me seems like a momentous anniversary, 72 years of marriage. 72 years of marriage. Can't we say praise God and great for... So it might be appropriate if after church you find them and congratulate them. Okay. So what a great thing that we get to have in our congregation. And by the way, like many of our senior members, they have made very significant contributions to this church family over many decades. And there are others among us, but we're talking about them today. And we really appreciate you, Jean and Vera. You're dear to our hearts. Coincidentally, see, we're talking about honoring our father and mother. And I want to ask you to just pause and think, what were your parents like? Or if your parents are sitting right beside you, what are your parents like? And I'm not going to ask you to speak, but just think about that. What are your parents like? How do they parent you, or how did they parent you? And I'm going to tell you a little story about my parents. I was very blessed to have effective and loving parents. And they were also committed to each other as a couple all the way to their respective passings a few years ago. They didn't make it to 72, but they got up in there. I think they got in the 60s. And I so appreciate my parents. And I want to tell you a story about the wisdom of my father. Like a lot of children, I was warned about some things, but I did them anyway. And I was warned not to play with fire, but I played with fire. And a friend was even more interested in fire than I was. My friend was Charlie. So Charlie and I went out one day, and we lived kind of in the semi-country, and there were some grasslands and fields and brush around our house. And Charlie said, let's start a fire. And I said, okay. And I didn't have any matches, but Charlie carried matches with him. So what do you know? We started a fire on the ground, and then we said, okay, we better put it out. So we stomped it out. And Charlie said, that was fun. Notice I'm blaming Charlie. Okay. I was fully complicit in this. Anyway, so we started the fire again. It got a little bigger, and we put it out, and we thought that was fun. And I don't know how many times we did that, but you know what happened? We let it get so big we couldn't put it out. Because it was thrilling to see it, but also we knew we had to put it out. But then it got so big, we couldn't put it out. And the fire was spreading. And so it was about a 2-minute run to our house. So Charlie and I ran to our house, And we said, there's a fire. And then we proceeded to hide, both of us. We found hiding spots. So then we heard sirens. The local volunteer fire department had to be called out to put out our fire. And by the way, the fire was not on our land, it was on a neighbor's land. And I'm laughing because that was bad. That was really bad. I should have known better. I did know better. But here's what I want to get to. I was so distraught. I was so sorry. I really felt bad. And I was mortified. And in my head, I was beating myself up. And I was saying, I was talking to myself the way you do when you know you've really done something bad and wrong. By the way, I think I was 12. And my dad eventually found me in my hiding spot. And we had a talk. And there was punishment for me, but it was measured punishment because he could see that I was really sorry, and he could see that I had learned a lesson. Fortunately, no really serious harm came from our fire. The firemen got there and put it out. It took their time and their energy, and it really inconvenienced a lot of people. And there was some burned grass for a couple of years, so it was bad. But I want to point out my father. My father had a wisdom that I don't know that I would have had I been in his shoes. To know how much to intervene, how much to try to drive home a lesson, and how much to let the lesson just happen on its own. Do you know what I'm talking about? So when I became a parent later, I found out how difficult it is to be a parent. Parenting is one of the most challenging things any one of us can take up. And so that's a little story about my father. But the Bible has instruction about parenting and about our parents. And so as we talk about this, I want to start out by saying this is not so much a salvation issue. In other words, you don't have to be a perfect parent to be saved. You need to be an effective parent. Why? Because your children need you to be an effective parent. And that's why. So it's not a salvation issue. It's a way that we can be the right kind of parent for our children. And if we're open to God's leading, we will take some responsibility about this in the proper way, won't we? And also this issue of parenting actually tells us some things about God. So the fifth commandment is right there. Can you see that? Can you read that together in a choral fashion? If you can, let's try. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. That's from the New King James Version. So I actually was prompted on this topic by a writer that I have respected. He had a column in the Buffalo newspaper for many years, and it was called The God Squad. And, as a person interested in spiritual things, I'm reading the paper, and here's an article, a column once a week about godly issues. And one of the writers was a rabbi, Rabbi Gelman. I think he may have passed by now. But he had a really interesting column about honoring our parents. And so I got that, and I studied it, and I said, we need to make a sermon about this. We meaning me and myself. And I need to make a sermon about this. And so I used some of his ideas and some of my own, and that's how we have what I'm sharing with you today. So the Bible instructs us clearly on how to treat our mother and father in this fifth commandment, and we just read it. And it marks a transition from the first four commandments. The first four commandments are about our relationship to God. So you'll have no other gods before me. You'll make no graven images. You won't take God's name in vain. You'll worship God on Sabbath, and here we are. So they're all about honoring God, aren't they? But commandments 5 through 10 are about taking care of each other and honoring, as it were, and respecting others. And it starts with honoring our parents, the fifth commandment, the first of those. So it's that transition. And it deals with our relationship with our parents and honoring them. Our parents are the first humans with whom we develop a relationship. And it's also the only commandment out of the 10 that has a promise embedded in it. You know, the promise says that your days may be long. So it has those special features. You know, after I was a child, I didn't really think about parents. When I was a child, I was thinking about, I need to obey my parents. I need to learn from my parents. I was thinking about it. But after childhood, I really wasn't thinking about it until I had a child of my own. And I was reminded of this fifth commandment. I want to pause and ask you, can you find someone sitting near you? Can you and the other people around you talk about characters in the Bible that seem to honor their parents? There must be some people like that in the Bible. People in the Bible who we would say honored their parents. Can you talk with someone and see if you can identify and talk about how they honored their parents? Let's just take 2 minutes and let's do that. Three. Are you contemplating?
I am.
Okay. Okay, so I don't even think I gave you 2 minutes, but I bet you came up with some names. So, Tammy, did you come up with a name?
I just thinking, Noah's children, okay? No names. Noah's children.
Noah's children.
I mean, because they did listen. Nobody comes to mind.
Okay.
You are.
They obeyed Noah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Noah's children. I think one was Ham, one was Japheth. Okay. Christina, you have a name?
Yes,
Jesus. So I was hoping someone would say him because he did, of course, honor his parents. And I'm sure some others of you were thinking about Jesus. And let's think about how he honored them. As far as we know, well, not only as far as we know, we trust he was a model child. And even on the cross, didn't he look out for his mother? While he was in the worst pain anyone could have, he was looking out for his mother, right? Sebastian, do you have an idea? Esther? Yeah. Can you tell us a little more? Yes, Esther followed yes. And Mordecai was like a father to her, and she followed, he was wise, and she followed his guidance, even though she was a teenager or a grown-up. Yeah. One more. Anyone else have one? Yes. Moses. Absolutely. Tell me more. I mean, he was a baby, but then he went back and lived with his mother, right? Yes. 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 How could Moses have ever been as effective a leader if he hadn't been with a fantastic pair of parents and listened to them? Yes. Yes. Daniel? Yes. Right. Right. Yes. Yes. These are all giants of Bible stories, and I don't know about you, but in heaven, I would really like to have a conversation with them about some of these things. So actually, we could go on about some people who in the Bible were outstanding examples of honoring parents. In my list, I had some of the ones that you had. I also thought about Joseph. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, but he still took care of his family, and he still honored his father and got his father to a safe place while they were in a famine in their land. He helped his father and his brothers come to a safe place in spite of being betrayed by his brothers. Well, so note this commandment says, honor your father and your mother. So let's think about that. It doesn't so much instruct us to love our parents, although most of us love our parents with all our hearts, but it doesn't actually say, it doesn't command us to love our parents, but it does say to honor our parents. And so this is where we have to admit that some parents may not be fully lovable. Most of us had lovable parents, I'm sure. But I have heard friends talk about how their experience as a child was not very positive, and their parents in some ways, they didn't feel supported or loved or whatever. But the Bible doesn't say anything but honor your parents. And I think that no matter what our parents were like to us, God would have us still honor them in whatever ways that we can. So I won't list all of the things that could go wrong in parenting, but having been a parent and seen how difficult it is to be a parent, I can imagine how some parents could kind of lose their way in the parenting process. And by the way, I won't speak for my wife, but I will say I failed our son multiple times as a parent, but somehow he grew up and he's a productive person. And he seems to love us, and we love him, in spite of all of the trials of parenting. So, but I also know that parenting can be very stressful. But some parents may be somehow incapable of loving or supporting their children. Maybe they are repeating a generational cycle of neglect or poor parenting that they had. We don't know. Maybe sometimes parents are suffering mental health issues, and it's hard to be a fully functioning parent when yourself you're having mental health issues. So, and of course, if any adult or parent were to direct a child to do something immoral or improper, we're not to obey them. But still, we come back to the idea of honor. There are ways to honor our parents. And if we focus on what our parents did that we feel like was a failure, rather than what they did that was helpful and provided for us, then we're missing some really important aspects of our parents. Our parents, at the very minimum, provided us with life. We wouldn't be here without our parents. So at the very least, there's that. And if we can't honor the visible creator of our life, our parents, will it be any easier to honor our invisible creator, Father? So this seems to be the core meaning of the fifth commandment. We should recognize in gratitude the life that our parents gave us and our Heavenly Father gave us. And that gift of life is something we did not earn. It just came to us. So in that regard, it's like grace. I didn't cause myself to be born. My parents gave me life, and God gave me life. So I received this gift, and I should be grateful for it. We should all consider that. So, what does it mean to honor? If we look at the original word, and I'm not a scholar of Hebrew, so I depend on other scholars to interpret it for me, but the word for honor is kabed, and Rabbi Gelman says the best translation of that word, honor, is to do your duty towards your parents. Can you imagine we have a duty to our parents? Okay, it could be. I want to ask you to stop and talk to a seatmate again about how we can do our duty, honor our parents. What could that be? Just have a little 2-minute conversation with people around you, and let's see what you think. This is 5, this is 6. So let me break in again, and let's see if we can collect some creative ideas for how we can honor our parents, do our duty to our parents. Is there anyone who would volunteer to share something? Steve.
Financially in their old age?
Financially helping them as they age, yes. That makes sense. His mother seconds that. Stephanie.
I'm speaking for Elise, but she said in the event of parents who haven't fulfilled their duty, not getting revenge, not taking up.
Okay. So a child can be gracious to parents who may not have been gracious to them. If Jesus is living in our hearts, that's something that seems like could happen. And there were instances of that in the Bible, I think. Don. Spend time with them. Wouldn't that be really good for everybody? Yep, absolutely. Yes.
Yes, respect.
Yes.
That they are our parents. And what does it say that the days that you long upon the land?
Yes. Yes.
But opposite of that is with the Lord thy God keep you. So if you don't respect them with that, so if you don't respect them, what's the opposite of that?
You won't live long. Right. Yes, in Jewish culture, there is that opposite. So you take care of your parents and you're blessed. You don't care of the parents and you lose the blessing and you maybe have your life shortened. I'm not sure I want to go that far, but I think it could be. It could be. Jean.
I just wanted to mention that in their later years, my mom, bless her heart, went into a nursing home.
Right.
And I made sure, excuse me, I went to see her, my husband and I, but also when I got those phone calls, and she would say, Jean, I need yada, yada, yada. She got it that day or even the next day.
Because you were trying to help her out.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. We wanted to make sure she knew
Right.
that, guess what? I still love you. I'm here for you.
Right.
Even
So those are some seem appropriate ways to honor our parents. Sebastian, you have another idea? What's that? To love your parents a lot. Is that what you said? I bet they would really, really like that. Yes, dear.
I was just thinking that I think something else that parents would love and appreciate and honoring them would be to talk to them about the good lessons that we are practicing
Right.
as their children, whether we are young or whether we are adult, very older, much
Right,
older
right.
adults, is to tell them, I practiced this in my life, I learned it from you when I was a
Yes.
child or when I was a young person.
And
It helped
yeah,
confirmation.
right.
Affirmation.
Yeah, like I'm doing this, but I'm doing this because of you. You helped me do this, and I'm so glad. And it was your influence on me.
Even if it's, I love sunsets and I appreciate them because
Right.
you taught me.
Right. So, yes.
Yes, my dear brother and sister in front of me were telling me about their culture. And they were telling us because they're Filipino, they give back to their parents by allowing their parents to live with them. I think that's
Sure.
how they give back.
Sure. And I didn't know that. And I think we all think that's really wonderful. It can be a stressor to have other people outside of your nuclear family living with you, but it's also sometimes it's a blessing and sometimes it's needed and it's right. And so let's just explore that a little more. In our culture, it's very common for people to say, do what you love. And it's nice if you can do what you love. And a lot of us get to do that. But that by implication, there is don't do what you don't love to do. You see the flip of that? And there's this almost universal cultural assumption that that's the secret to happiness. Don't do the stuff you don't like to do, and do the stuff you love to do. Where does duty come into that description? And so it's logical, but it's not actually the Okay, this one will work, I bet. All right, so God does not want us to be miserable, but happiness is not the result of directly seeking our own pleasure or doing what we find appealing and nothing but that. And it's interesting that there's actually a biblical view of happiness that was captured in the statement by Mother Teresa, the very respected Catholic nun who gave her life in service to the poor in India, maybe? Notice what she said. Happiness is the natural fruit of duty. Think about that. Happiness is the fruit of duty. It's not so much the fruit of doing what you love to do. It's the fruit of duty. Think about a time when you did something you know needed to be done, and it was for someone else and you did it. Didn't that bring you at the end of it? Didn't you experience some sort of happiness? Most of us probably have. And over 100 years ago, Ellen White wrote on this same topic. We find our happiness in the happiness of those whom we help and bless. She also said, obedience to God's word is our life, our happiness. Children should early learn that happiness is not found in selfish gratification. It follows only in the wake of duty. interesting, isn't it? Because that flies in the face of what our culture is telling us. If you want to be happy, do what you love. But what if some things I need to do I don't love? Bible says you should do them under God's power and direction. Do what needs to be done. So these writers were echoing principles in the Bible. So we know the fifth commandment, but look at these other verses. If you can read these other verses in a choral fashion, let's try it. Do you see where it says, children, obey? Let's read that. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this is your acceptable duty in the Lord. Let's read the next one from 1 Timothy. If a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn first of all to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. I kind of like how it includes grandparents in that one too. But isn't this interesting? We got the fifth commandment, but we have these other verses in the Bible. We have Mother Teresa, and we have Ellen White. And they're all repeating the same thing. So there's a lot of agreement there, and I think that's important for us to acknowledge. There's actually one more verse. Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on the earth. This is the New Living Translation. So there is this consistency through Scripture. So when we do what we ought to do, there's a happiness that we experience. And there's this definition of a true mature adult that I like. I learned it from a dear friend. She said, a true and mature adult is one who does what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, whether one feels like doing it or not. By the way, that's kind of the description of a parent of a young child, right? Because when you're a parent of a young child, this is your life, okay? But when you're going through life as a believer in God, there are times when you and I may need to say this to ourselves. There's something that needs to be done, and I need to do it. Whether I feel like it or not, it needs to be done. This is especially in the case of serving other people. And so there's another saying that we say sometimes, if not now, when? If not me, who? You know, that kind of thing, where we more or less take responsibility. And then there is this final quote that I want to share with you, one that many of us who have read Ellen White's writings have seen. This is a key quotation from her. Let's read this aloud in a choral fashion. The greatest want of the world is the want of men who will not be bought or sold, men who in their inmost souls are true and honest, men who do not fear to call sin by its right name, men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole, men who will stand for the right though the heavens fall. Now, she wrote this over 100 years ago, I think. We would today say men and women, and we wouldn't just focus on men. And everything she's saying here is just another way of saying that there are values and beliefs and principles that God calls us to follow. And He will give us the power to do those things, but it starts with us acknowledging what we need to do. So what does the fifth commandment teach us about God? Isn't it true that everything in the Bible teaches us about God? So here we have the fifth commandment, and it's telling us to honor our parents, but what does it teach us about God? So, well, we know Jesus was an exemplar of respect and honoring of his parents. And another thing is that Jesus said at the cross, not my will, but yours be done. So Jesus took on this sense of duty. And by the way, he did it in love, not merely duty. But it was his commitment to that role that he took on voluntarily. We believe that Jesus volunteered to be the sacrifice for humanity. And he took on that role that involves sacrificing himself on our behalf. And it was his commitment to that goal of saving us that was a duty, wasn't it? It was a duty he lovingly fulfilled. But that's something that he exemplified. Not my will, but yours be done. So Jesus is the ultimate example of this selfless duty to others, even those who are ungrateful recipients of his grace. Because not all of humanity appreciated what Jesus did, but he did it anyway. That's another level of taking responsibility and doing our duty. So he sacrificed himself for our good. So honoring our parents is the first and best way to learn to honor God. For children, honoring parents is to cooperate and follow their directions, again, as long as they're in harmony with biblical principles. And for adults, one way, of course, is to provide care, give them time, the things that we just said a few minutes ago. We are here because of our parents, and we can fulfill this responsibility, and we can do it with love. I want to extend it also. It's not just our parents. There are people in our lives who may not be our biological parents, but they have really shared their wisdom. They've mentored us. They've been good to us. Wouldn't that include this whole commandment? Sure there are. Sure it would. So we should honor those who are our seniors. It's easy to say now that I'm a senior, but even if I weren't a senior, this fits. We should honor those who are more advanced than we are in years. And so if your parents are alive and reachable, like you can visit them or call them or something, why don't you let this sermon today remind you to reach out to them? Visit them, call them, tell them of your gratitude, tell them what they've done for you. And if you can say it, tell them how much you love them. Isn't that appropriate? Absolutely. So, all of the things that I present in sermon fashion, I study for my own personal growth. But then I also sometimes think this could be appreciated or valued by my friends. So this is my hope for us. So let's finish our time together now I think what we should do is have a song, and then we'll have a prayer.